Fremen, free people, a nation that passed through thousands of trials, having made a pilgrimage across half the known galaxy. A society of religious fanatics and efficient warriors, who managed to defeat the invincible Sardaukar. What did the ancestors of these people seek in the desert? What did they dream of? What did they hope to gain by lifting Paul Atreides on their shield and proclaiming him the Messiah? And what did they receive in the end? Let's try to find out. The ancestors of the Arrakis Fremen were followers of the heretical Zen-Sunni sect, interpreting the onset of the Titan Wars as the promised Krasilek. The relatively peace-loving Zen-Sunni tried to avoid the war. Even when it became clear they were mistaken, the wars seemed senseless to them. Such a position did not appeal to the League of Nobles, and persecution of the Zen-Sunni began. The main part of the heretic community wandered through the galaxy. This journey lasted many generations, and the Fremen memory retained Porotrin, Salusa Secundus, Bela Tagus, Rossak, Taogrud, Harmenthep. Most of these planets were far from friendly to colonizers. On some of them, the Zen-Sunni were enslaved for a long time. A peculiar Hajj ended on Arrakis, a harsh, waterless planet, openly hostile to humans. The wanderings of the sectarians ended before the start of the Butlerian Jihad. In 383 AG, this time, the Zen-Sunni managed to hide quite successfully. There was no reason for the slavers to venture into the fearsome planet without necessity. The outcasts were successfully forgotten. In conditions of total water scarcity, a harsh but effective society was formed. Everything here was subordinated to one goal: survival. The clan traditions of the Zen-Sunni on the new planet were built around the preservation of moisture, giving rise to a strict but conditionally just society. Thanks to such justice, a young orphan named Selim was exiled from his Sietch for a crime committed by another. Instead of perishing in the desert, Selim managed to tame a sandworm. In an old botanical station he founded a new community. Under the influence of spice, Selim managed to comprehend the essence of the connection between worms, the desert, and spice, which added new dimensions to the beliefs of the inhabitants of Arrakis. Existence in extreme conditions often places the mystical aspect of religion at the forefront. The society formed on Arrakis tied its philosophy to Shai Hulud, the Great Worm. This is a very interesting point. On one hand, the worship of the worm as a god. On the other, the use of real worms as riding animals and for rituals. Even the unique weapon of the Fremen, the Kriss knife, was made from the teeth of a sandworm. However, while the universe was engulfed in the Butlerian Jihad, the inhabitants of Arrakis had not yet become true Fremen. The desert dwellers came to this metamorphosis when the demand for spice grew due to the discovery of its utility for interstellar travel. That's when slavers flocked to Arrakis, seeking to reduce the cost of this dangerous trade. Around 88 AG, some of Selim's followers went deep into the desert, where the first true Fremen communities were formed. The peace-loving Zen-Sunni had fled slavery for centuries. The Fremen of Arrakis defended their freedom with weapons in hand. Perhaps the native society of Arrakis would have eventually become a bunch of fanatical ragged men, as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen believed. But the Bene Gesserit sisters stepped in time. Their Missionaria Protectiva program tightly wove into the religious doctrine of the future Fremen, the belief in the Lisan al-Gaib, the giver of water. The most interesting part is that when sending their agents into the desert, the Reverend Mothers did not anticipate what this could lead to. The Fremen lived on Arrakis in closed societies, Sietches. The term Sietch denotes both the place where people live and the tribe. Usually, places of residence were extensive caves equipped with moisture traps. These very moisture traps were built based on the principle of ancient imperial botanical stations, one of which became home to the outcast Selim, the Worm Rider. In addition, Sietch entrances were carefully camouflaged and tightly sealed with waterproof fabric to prevent moisture loss. Tribal water and spice storage facilities were set up in the caves. A Sietch was governed by a naib, the tribal leader. Unlike other cultures, the title of naib among the Fremen was not hereditary. The naib was the strongest and most merciless warrior of the Sietch, who challenged the predecessor to a duel. The victor gained power but also responsibility. He was obliged to accept into his family the wives and children of the slain rival. Thus, a person unable to even support the inherited family would hardly have claimed the title of tribe leader. Power aside, all water, belonged to the tribe, and most of the Fremen's everyday life was tied to preserving and collecting every drop of moisture not consumed by sand trout. All life on Arrakis was built around possessing water as the greatest treasure. Therefore, the foundation of the Fremen's way of life was water discipline. This was a kind of code that every Sietch obeyed. To preserve the water of their bodies, the Fremen invented special suits that recycled all human waste into pure water. In a properly fitted and functional suit, a Fremen could survive in the open desert for several weeks. Each also had an individual Frem kit, which contained condensate and tools necessary for surviving a storm. Another important part of water discipline was the processing of all corpses, both human and animal, into water. The Fremen did not hesitate to kill outsiders for the water in their bodies. An interesting part of this very water discipline was that spitting was accepted as a sign of respect. Tears, on the other hand, were considered wasteful. However, in some cases, giving water to the dead or simply weeping was regarded as a nearly mystical act. By contributing water to the Sietch's common reserve, a Fremen would receive water rings. But don't think of this as an analog for money. Before Paul Muad'Dib's ascension to the throne, the Fremen were barely interested in any civilized benefits aside from water. And the universe's most precious substance, spice, was constantly consumed by them in food as seasoning. Thanks to such a diet, all adult Fremen's eyes turned blue, losing the boundary between sclera and iris. The Fremen themselves call this mutation the Eyes of Ibad. However, the religion of the Fremen of Arrakis was significantly altered by the Bene Gesserit with their Missionaria Protectiva. The ancient Buddhist-Islamic philosophy of the Zen Sunni was tightly interwoven with their own faith in the coming of the Kwisatz Haderach, thanks to the sisters' efforts. True, the Fremen called their prophet Mahdi, or Lisan al-Gaib, and they did not know that their beloved prophet was supposed to appear as a result of the sisters' genetic experiments. To all this was added the worship of Shai Hulud, the Great Worm. However, worshipping a divine idol did not prevent them from killing young sandworms with water to obtain the Water of Life. The Water of Life itself is a poisonous potion, but the Reverend Mother of a Sietch, drinking it for the first time, received not only ancestral memory, she also learned to transform the deadly poison into a composition later used for religious purposes. And the Fremen would have continued living in their desert without worry, if not for the appearance among them of Pardot Kynes, the Imperial Planetologist. This man, while conducting research, discovered that Arrakis was once a completely different place. It was a planet with a mild climate, open bodies of water, rainfalls, and without worms. Without access to the genetic memory of the Reverend Mothers, Pardot Kynes did not understand the connection between the desert and the sand shroud. But he perfectly understood that to further study the planet, he needed to become one with its native population. The planetologist settled in the Sietch of Taber and married the sister of a future Naib. His son, Liet, was not only born a part of the Fremen people, but became their leader for many years. Liet inherited his father's post as Imperial Planetologist, but the Empire wasn't very interested in the internal affairs of Arrakis, as long as spice was regularly shipped. Using his position, Liet Kynes completed his father's research. He came to the conclusion that the planet could be returned to its flourishing past. This idea captivated the Fremen, and he became their spiritual leader. He didn't just promise them unlimited water. Harsh people would not believe such promises. Liet Kynes developed a plan whereby in a few generations, strict water conservation would become unnecessary. Accustomed to hard and dangerous desert labor, the Fremen were inspired by the planetologist's ideas and followed him. In remote corners of the desert, they carefully planted hardy plants, installed moisture traps, and built water storage facilities. The belief and the possibility of terraforming Arrakis into a paradise world captivated almost the entire people. Before the arrival of the Atreides on Arrakis, the Fremen were of little interest to anyone. The Harkonnen governor, Glossu Rabban, sincerely believed the locals were a useless bunch of ragged men. Such negligence proved fatal not only for the Harkonnens, but for the entire Carino Empire. The Missionaria Protectiva had done its job well, preparing the ground for the coming of a messiah. Upon arriving on the planet, the son of Duke Atreides, Paul, repeatedly heard himself referred to as Lisan al-Gaib. This did not concern him much, until after the Harkonnen attack. Supported by the Imperial Sardaukar, he had to flee into the desert with his mother. And here, an interesting detail emerges. The desert dwellers turned out to be better soldiers than the vaunted guard of the Emperor. Centuries of harsh trials had made the Fremen very effective warriors. In any other case, travelers found in the desert would have become water for the nearest Sietch. However, Liet Kynes shared the beliefs of the people he considered his own. Thanks to his warning, the Fremen of Sietch Tabr, who met Jessica and Paul, did not kill them immediately. Prophet or not, young Paul had to pass a trial by combat. Thus, he and his mother became part of the tribe. The Fremen, recognizing Jessica as a Bene Gesserit witch, wished for Jessica and Paul to teach them their style of combat. Training in the Bene Gesserit system was to significantly enhance the warriors. Jessica herself was offered to become a Reverend Mother. The Gesserit accepted the right, thereby dooming her unborn daughter. Paul, to become a true Fremen, had to undergo several more trials. The author focuses on one in particular, the taming of Shai Hulud. Paul had to ride a worm alone and control it. He succeeded. Unfortunately, his deep immersion in the mystical beliefs of the Fremen led him to drink the water of life as well. Anyone else in Paul Atreides' place would have died, but the young Duke survived and gained the gift of prescience. Strange as it may seem, the moment Paul Muad'Dib gained prescience marked the starting point of the degeneration of Fremen society. The desert dwellers who rallied under the banner of their Mahdi became the force that helped overturn the empire. Thanks to his mentat abilities and the gift of foresight, Paul Atreides was able to unite and lead a massive rebellion. As a result, the Carino dynasty fell, and the Harkonnens were destroyed, and Muad'Dib became emperor. The army of deadly warriors poured into the galaxy with a new jihad. Across the explored galaxy, Fremen forces spread their faith with fire and sword. They did not stop even when Paul, now blind, abdicated the throne and left for the desert, all in accordance with the customs of the Fremen themselves. But Muad'Dib's possessed sister, Aliyah, effectively destroyed the Fremen as a society, because along with the conquests of planets where water fell from the sky came the terraforming of Arrakis. The desert shrank, the number of worms diminished, and the abundance of available water destroyed the ancient way of life. The process was completed by Leto II, the God Emperor, who transformed himself into a worm. After 3,500 years of his reign, a true Fremen could be found only on the pages of history. This history was written by the God Emperor Leto himself, trying to guide humanity along the Golden Path. Fremen, brave soldiers, selfless laborers, religious fanatics. Over their many centuries of history, they went through dozens of incarnations, including these, former heretics and outcasts who forcibly instilled their faith in Muad'Dib into hundreds of prosperous worlds. an army with which Regent Alia Atreides held the galaxy by the throat. What happened to them? Probably just elementary evolution. Every society in history experiences a beginning, a rise, and eventual decline. Such stories abound even in real life, on actual Earth. And that's all from me. If you like this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. Your activity is the best reward for me. Thank you for watching, see you soon, bye.